We're live. I love how it says you are live. It's very excited that we're live. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This is Mind Your Banners post game for Indiana 42, Maryland 28. Mike, there's a lot to get into here, but I think the most fundamental thing is like Indiana delivered. There was a lot of build up to this game. I think, frankly, even to some extent, like basically coming out of UCLA, there was going to be what's the crowd going to be like? What's the energy going to be? I thought for the weather, it rained all day. It's still raining. It's been raining for about 48 hours now. I thought the crowd was actually pretty good, and they really did stick around for Indiana. It was loud in here compared to certainly what it normally is, but even, I mean, I've been around some bigger crowds, and it was substantially more tangible. And even through some mistakes, even through the adversity that we've kind of asked this team, you haven't faced it yet. What's it going to be like when you do? Indiana delivered. They did not have a perfect day by any means, but they put in the kind of performance, the kind of result that should get, I think, buy-in from those fans we're talking about.
Well, they still haven't trailed this season, even though they got off to a wobbly start. 2 turnovers in the first quarter, 2 interceptions by Curtis Rourke on some, just straight up bad decisions, bad throws. But never defense answered both those times with 3 and outs.
And did the defense answer all 4 turnovers with 3 and outs?
I think just 3 of them. I think the first 3. And then in the second half, they traded scores with Maryland, but still stayed out in front, and it was an impressive all-around effort. The defense, I thought, picked up the offense when it needed to, and when the defense kind of let up a couple drives, the offense was right there. And Curtis Rourke, Curt Cignetti called him a grizzled veteran. That he didn't have any concerns about how he would respond to a day like today, where he throw 2 interceptions and he didn't get panicky. He just kept making I think. The touchdown throw to Omar Cooper, some of the throws to Elijah Surratt were really impressive in what we've seen all season. And then I think more impressive in the context of the game, where he just kind of shrugged off, I had a bad start, it doesn't matter, turn the page, and then that's what they did.
Yeah, I think it's kind of how much everybody sort of just picked up everybody else. We talked about the way the defense responded to the turnovers. You talked about the way the offense responded. Every time it seemed like Maryland was kind of getting its tail up a little bit, was kind of maybe sort of feeling its way into the game. Indiana punched back. There was that really big drive at the end of the first half that was just 3 plays, boom, boom, boom. There was the drive to answer the long Roman Himby touchdown, where D'Angelo Pons maybe can make that play. He gets blocked by the umpire. Himby kind of goes 75 yards untouched. I think that like the overarching thing to me was we did wonder, what this team would look like when it wasn't all so easy. And I think we expected maybe a better look at that at UCLA, and Indiana just clearly was kind of a class above UCLA. But this Maryland team, they're 3-2, they're 0-2 in the Big Ten, so let's not make them out to be too much. But I think that's a good team. I think it is. I don't think it's a great team, but I think it's a good team. I think it's a team that will probably finish the season in or around a bowl game. They know what they're about. They've got a kind of a proven system. Obviously, they don't have Ty Felton for the second half today, which is a big miss. He goes down hurt. But even before that, it felt like they actually were kind of keeping him a little bit quiet in the game. Indiana sacked Billy Edwards, Maryland's quarterback, more today than Maryland had allowed in the first 4 games combined. If you take away that 75-yard run, which is kind of one bust.
You can't do that.
You can, though. 27 total yards rushing other than that. I'm just saying, my point is, we asked what it would look like when it did not come easy for Indiana. And there were moments today when because we sit next to each other in the press box through gritted teeth, there were moments today when I just sort of remarked to you, like, this is what it looks like when it starts to get away from Indiana, when it turns against Indiana. And at virtually every one of those moments, this team stood up and made something meaningful happen, and ultimately they take control.
Yeah, and like I said, just kind of an impressive. They're taking on the identity that Curt Cignetti kind of laid out for them before the season. And one thing I asked the defense a bunch today. We got to talk to James Carpenter, Aiden Fisher, and Mikel Kamara, who were all on JMU last year. This is essentially what they did with generating all the pressure they did against Maryland. Looked a lot like what success looked like at JMU last year. That team led the country, or 1 or 2 in tackles for loss and sacks.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they did today. Billy Edwards at one point was really on target. Only missed like 4 pass attempts, but it was the sacks, It was the pressure. It was the throws that he couldn't make. That was the kind of the difference. Third and long situations, they really struggled, and that was all due to the front four. I gotta say I was wrong before the season. I thought the way they generate pressure was through blitzing and different packages. And they had one blitz today that got home, but really they've relied on that front four a lot. This was the most that those guys have played all season in terms of reps. Kamara's done that, but in terms of CJ West, James Carpenter played just a ton today, didn't leave the field, and were very consistent all game long, and rattled Edwards. And that was the difference, because when he had time, he did complete some throws downfield. He had 289 yards, had a bunch of explosive, three or four explosive plays. It was that pressure that they consistently generated. I think that was the key to their defense.
You mentioned Rourke, and his final line is interesting. 22 of 33, 359 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. The 2 picks were on, I think, Indiana's first 2 drives of the first half. Obviously, he also has the fumble in the fourth quarter that looked problematic for a moment. I don't think anybody maybe exemplifies, if you are looking for sort of somebody to sort of carry the banner for the way Indiana played today, it's probably Rourke. There's some mistakes in there. Today marked the first time he got sacked since the FIU game. These were Indiana's first turnovers of the season. Those two picks, obviously, they were his first interceptions of the season. He had a couple other throws that were a little dicey. He also had some throws that were really good. The throw to Omar Cooper on that touchdown at the end of the first half was really, really good. But in terms of the ability to kind of put bad moments in your pocket and just kind of move past them very quickly, that was a lot of what it felt like today was for Indiana. And it's, again, if he were sitting here, he'd probably say it's complimentary. The defense, bailed me out every time that I make one of those mistakes. But the point is, this was a game where Indiana, it was a game where you probably couldn't expect anything resembling perfection, as wet as it is. It wasn't as windy as it was yesterday, but it was still fairly windy down there on the field. And again, Maryland's probably the best team Indiana's faced. You had to expect some mistakes. You had to expect some adversity. And I thought it was interesting that Cignetti, who is not afraid to sort of say, this isn't good enough, or, we've got to be better here, or whatever. He wasn't gushing about Rourke, but he clearly kind of looked at it and thought, I'm not worried about the turnovers because I know he's fine. Yeah. And this is the kind of performance where you say, geez, Curtis Rourke wasn't always great today, and yet 359 yards and 3 touchdowns in a Big Ten win is pretty meaningful.
Well, I think it would be remiss not mentioning the fact that he completed passes to 10 different targets, and how many different guys stepped up for him and made nice plays. I thought Elijah Surratt was unguardable in the second half, that he just sort of, anytime they he looked his way, and Surratt brought the ball down. We talked about Omar Cooper's catch. Price had a really nice one. Zach Horton set up the touchdown early with a throw that was a behind him, and he made a diving grab across back of his body. That was really nice. So you talk about the skill guys that they have sort of come through all season long, and it's a really big part of that success how deep that bench is. Donovan McCulley played 1 snap and scored a touchdown.
And I want to bring this up to you because Curt Cignetti says post game that they were waiting for that. And I think you give credit to the players because they make – I think that's good. But I think you're also seeing a staff that is doing a really good – like Indiana puts McCulley in there because it's looking for what they call zero coverage, which means there's no safety just playing back in zone. They're looking for McCulley, who's obviously a very big-bodied wide receiver and is really good kind of in red zone type situations, to be matched up one-on-one with a safety who's not going to be as athletic as he is. And it just feels like we're also seeing a moment, like we're giving credit, justifiably.
They could use all these weapons and put them in situations to succeed.
Indiana's staff is making a lot of the right calls in all 3 phases.
And we mentioned this last week, the idea that this guy was by far their best player last year, and he's struggling to find. They're looking for like specific spots to insert him because the other guys are playing so well. And so I think when you talk about Rourke's success that he had, a lot of the time today, I thought his guys picked him up, especially early, because that was when he was struggling. In the second half, he was really on target. But in the first half, Kalen Black made a nice play on a 3rd down. Like I said, Horton, they were making plays for him when I was crossed, just bailing him out a little bit on some of the throws, with that wet ball that were behind them, and kind of lifting this offense. And, it's imposing what they have right now, trying to, They didn't run the ball particularly well, even though the numbers look okay at the end of the game. Lawton had 90 yards, but they still, you can't sleep on Ellison. You can't sleep on Lawton. And I just think it's a hard team to try to scheme up against right now, just because of the depth they have and because of all the weapons they have.
I think you do have to talk about the defense too. I mean, it's really kind of 21 points. That last Maryland touchdown is very much like a trade yards for time kind of situation. Again, 5 sacks. Maryland had only allowed 4 all season. This is actually the first game all year Indiana hasn't forced a turnover, so I'm sure that's something that will come up.
There was a couple of near.
Yeah, I mean, they were close 3 or 4 times at least on Edwards. I mean, like Edwards had first of all, Maryland was unreal on tip passes.
They had 2 key. One was a touchdown.
But Maryland's 5 of 15 on third downs, 0 of 3 on fourth downs. I'm looking at the red zone here. Maryland only gets into the red zone twice. Now they convert on both of those, but still, if you're only allowing an opponent, Maryland was scoring something like 35, 36 points a game coming into this. And Maryland has played a tougher schedule than Indiana. I don't think Virginia's that great, and we'll see kind of what Michigan State looks like, end of October into November. But the point is,
Western Illinois team is left.
Yeah, the point is, it's a Big Ten opponent and an ACC opponent before they got to this game, and Indiana made that offense look not bad. I mean, Edwards 389 and 3 scores. Himby, obviously, a big chunk of his yards are on the 1 carry, but he does go for over 100 yards, even without Ty Felton. It didn't happen. It basically didn't happen.
I mean, you could just take 21 points.
But the point is, I don't know that Maryland would come out of this game saying they were horrible offensively, and yet they lose this game by multiple scores. They're outclassed by Indiana.
I'm interested to see what the pressure numbers are when.
I mean, because they were on, and again, like
it's a weird game because he scored 20 points. He completed 26 passes, 39 yards, 3 touchdowns. But it felt like he was under siege at times.
Yes.
It was the ones that he just couldn't make because he had to pull the ball down or got sacked. And I'm curious to see. And they hadn't given up they only gave up more than 10 pressures in one of their 4 games so far, 32 for the season. I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana had over 20 quarterback pressures on one day. I just thought that it was that much of an effort from that forward.
So to the earlier point too, Maryland gets the ball on 4 separate turnovers. They do not get a first down on any of those possessions. They were 3 and outs, and then they had the 4 down possession
3 and outs
where they went when they had -7 yards on the 4 down possession after the Rourke fumble. So that was the moment that felt kind of like just the absolute sort of lid on the game is when Maryland kind of gets that last chance. I think they're down 3 scores at that point, and you fear 2. I think they're down 2 scores. I think it was 35-21, and they get the big change play. They get the Rourke fumble, and it's like, okay, maybe this is a moment to wobble, and Maryland just goes backward. And then Indiana gets the ball back and scores off of that. If I'm not mistaken, yes, Indiana scores 2 plays later off of that turnover on downs. The point is, I don't know. Obviously, you've been watching IU football less than I have in terms of just time on task or years or whatever. I'm not saying Indiana's perfect, but there's a complements and there's a competence and there's a complementary nature to the football Indiana's playing.
You combine those.
Yes, I did.
But I was going to ask
that I have not seen.
But speaking to your point, kind of spinning this forward, I think you had them at 9 wins at the end of the season predicted.
Yeah, I had them at 9. And then I was shamed when I ran my predictions by a couple of friends who used to cover IU football.
And you knocked it down 1?
I took it down to 8, but then I said they'd win the bowl game. So
all right. So I had them at 8 wins with the bowl win.
I had them at 9 with a bowl.
So what? I mean, look, they could easily get to 6-0 next week. I mean, they're playing.
I think they'll
less than Northwestern.
I think they will be a double-digit favorite.
How do you recalibrate your expectations for this team?
I mean, I think there's a very real chance they go to Michigan State 8-0.
Yeah.
And then you hit that 3-game stretch at
Michigan
State.
Are you talking about a team now from what we've seen in 5 games that could possibly be in the Big Ten championship game?
That still feels like a bit of a bridge too
even
far.
8-0?
Just because it's going to feel like rivalry game in East Lansing, Michigan at home, Ohio State on the road. Like that is far and away whatever.
They have to take 2 of the 3.
Whatever becomes of Michigan State this season, that is almost certainly the toughest 3-game stretch in their schedule. So obviously, first they have to get there. They've got Northwestern next weekend. I think they'll be a double-digit favorite against Northwestern. Then they've got the bye week. That Nebraska game shapes up to be fascinating here. I forget who Nebraska plays next week, but I think there's a decent chance. No, they have the bye week
bye
coming
week
into
Monday.
Indiana. I don't know who they're playing next week. They beat Purdue today. He's going to look it up while we're talking here. Nebraska is going to play Rutgers at home. So, I mean, they could win the game, but I would still make them the favorite. There's a decent chance
that's
that's
going to beat them up a little bit.
That's also homecoming. So that's like you're going to get a really good crowd here, and I don't think it's going to be one of those crowds that's just because the road fans travel well. You win that game, I mean, suddenly you're opening a road for yourself. Obviously, you've got Washington, which is a team that kind of top and incomplete right now. I think it's fair to say Washington had to go through a lot of what Indiana had to go through in terms of staff and roster turnover, and has not navigated it quite as well. And then, I mean, it's easy to map a path to 8. Not easy, but certainly very plausible given what we've seen so far. And then you hit that 3-game stretch where it's a proven ground. I guess the other question is, I don't know how all the tiebreakers shake out.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if you're going to talk in that scenario, you might need to beat Ohio State.
We're not getting into the. I'm just curious if you thought Big Ten is the championship games slightly step too far at this point.
I would say a step.
But 9 wins.
9 regular season wins, I think, is firmly on the table. Yeah, I mean, you only have to go 4-3, and you're going to be favored. Northwestern, as of today, you're going to be favored against Northwestern, Washington, and Purdue, I think, pretty comfortably. Yeah. I think you probably wind up favored, assuming you beat Northwestern against Nebraska. They're going to be ranked tomorrow. They're going to be. They're going to be ranked. So the point is, I just gave you 4 games, 3 of them at home, where Indiana is going to be the favorite, in some cases probably by double digits. And that alone gets you to 9. That's ignoring maybe winning the Spittoon in East Lansing, maybe upsetting Michigan. Maybe that's not even an upset. I don't know. But, as much as anything else, what's remarkable is, I guess the best way to sort of the best testament to how well Indiana's played in the first 5 weeks is that none of this seems having this conversation.
Well, I think at this point now you can recount. I mean, look, you get to the season 6-0. Next week, I'm assuming unless there's more hurricanes or some sort of weather-related event that impacts the lake effect that drives things crazy, it can happen. But they'll sort of walk through that game. But I think you do have to recalibrate and say, where does this team look in that back half of the? They're not going to do that. We can do that.
Right.
Yeah. And one of our viewers points out that Ohio State does play Oregon here coming up very soon. That's a big game for them. And so,
I come back to the way the schedule laid out. Have you seen Michigan State's schedule going into Indiana? It's at Boston College. I forget who they're playing this weekend. Did they play yesterday? Either way, then they've got Oregon at home. They've got to go to Penn State. I think they've got Iowa at home.
Michigan.
Michigan, not Penn State. Michigan. It is. So they get Ohio State today. Then they are at Oregon. Then a bye. Then Iowa, then at Michigan, then Indiana.
That's incredible.
It could be very beat up.
There's the 3 and 4.
And then after Indiana, they got to go to Illinois, which looks like a more difficult game than it did when the season began.
It's just an interesting landscape for Indiana to be right now. They look, 2-0 in the Big Ten, and the schedule they got. When we talked about sort of how this set up well for Xigeti, not maybe this well we thought kind of before the season, but I mean now you're looking at it, and like we said, I think your double-digit wins, I think, is easily attainable at this point with the bowl game.
I agree with that. Yeah, including the bowl
game.
We'll leave it there for now. Obviously, we're gonna. I don't know exactly what we'll do with the podcast this week. We'll find something. Maybe we'll just podcast live from Media Days because Media Days are up in Chicago this week.
We'll be there. We could do an extra long edition.
What we could do is we could just podcast 48 straight hours from Big Ten basketball Media Day. Just grab people as they walk by. Yeah. But for now, Indiana 48 or Indiana 42, Maryland 28.
This looks like it's being filled with a potato.
I don't. What is that? What kind of experience do we have?
What he does. You need to upgrade your equipment.
Well, we need to talk to
the next week.
We need to talk to the people who first strings things. Right now, we're just using my computer.
We are going to the makeshift stadium
that makes Northwestern more money. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach. Hoosiers are 5-0. This is their third 5-0 start ever. 1967, the Rose Bowl, and 1910, the season I'm sure you all remember. Those are the only other 5-0 starts. If they do win next week, it'll be the second time they've ever gone to 6-0. They started 8-0 in 1967. That's the best start in program history, by the way. As I often feel compelled to point out, if they did get to 10 wins, it would be the most single season in program history. So, for the Herald Times, Bloomington, for the Indianapolis Star, thank you all so much for watching. This will be up YouTube, podcast form, all that good stuff. Well, you can listen. I mean, to be fair, there's only 36 people, right?
No, the people listening.
That's good.
They need to know.
We're going to get better at this, mostly when I just get him, calm down.
And we get a 4K potato.